Level 1, the frozen ingredient handler. You open a freezer after a long day. Maybe it is in a supermarket, glowing under cold white lights. Maybe it is in your apartment, when you are too tired to cook from scratch. You pull out a frozen meal, look at the picture on the box, and think only about one thing: how fast it can become dinner. It looks simple. A tray. A sealed package. A few minutes in the microwave or oven. But you do not enter the frozen food factory through the supermarket freezer. You enter through the cold ingredient warehouse. The first thing that hits you is the air. It is sharp, dry, and cold enough to make your hands stiff inside your gloves. White vapor hangs near the heavy freezer doors. Pallets of frozen vegetables, sealed meat boxes, seafood cartons, sauce containers, dough ingredients, plastic trays, packaging film, and cardboard boxes stand in tall rows under pale industrial lights. Your job is at the bottom. You receive pallets. Scan batches. Check temperatures. Look for damaged cartons, broken seals, frost buildup, soft corners, moisture, and anything that suggests the cold chain has already been disturbed. A supervisor hands you a scanner and points toward a pallet of frozen ingredients. You scan the first box. Green. You scan the second. Green. Then you touch the corner of one carton and feel something wrong. Too soft. Not fully thawed. Not ruined in an obvious way. But different enough that the supervisor stops beside you. The pallet is pulled aside for review. No one argues. No one says it is probably fine. In this factory, probably fine can become thousands of unsafe meals later. At level 1, frozen food is not dinner yet. It is not convenience. It is not the picture on the box. It is cold pallets, strict temperatures, sealed cartons, and workers trying not to let one small break in the chain travel forward. And as the freezer door closes behind you with a heavy metallic sound, one question follows you deeper into the factory: what happens if the cold chain breaks before the meal even begins? Level 1, the frozen ingredient handler. You open a freezer after a long day. Maybe it is in a supermarket, glowing under cold white lights. Maybe it is in your apartment, when you are too tired to cook from scratch. You pull out a frozen meal, look at the picture on the box, and think only about one thing: how fast it can become dinner. It looks simple. A tray. A sealed package. A few minutes in the microwave or oven. But you do not enter the frozen food factory through the supermarket freezer. You enter through the cold ingredient warehouse. The first thing that hits you is the air. It is sharp, dry, and cold enough to make your hands stiff inside your gloves. White vapor hangs near the heavy freezer doors. Pallets of frozen vegetables, sealed meat boxes, seafood cartons, sauce containers, dough ingredients, plastic trays, packaging film, and cardboard boxes stand in tall rows under pale industrial lights. Your job is at the bottom. You receive pallets. Scan batches. Check temperatures. Look for damaged cartons, broken seals, frost buildup, soft corners, moisture, and anything that suggests the cold chain has already been disturbed. A supervisor hands you a scanner and points toward a pallet of frozen ingredients. You scan the first box. Green. You scan the second. Green. Then you touch the corner of one carton and feel something wrong. Too soft. Not fully thawed. Not ruined in an obvious way. But different enough that the supervisor stops beside you. The pallet is pulled aside for review. No one argues. No one says it is probably fine. In this factory, probably fine can become thousands of unsafe meals later. At level 1, frozen food is not dinner yet. It is not convenience. It is not the picture on the box. It is cold pallets, strict temperatures, sealed cartons, and workers trying not to let one small break in the chain travel forward. And as the freezer door closes behind you with a heavy metallic sound, one question follows you deeper into the factory: what happens if the cold chain breaks before the meal even begins? Level 3, the cooking line assistant. At level 3, the factory stops feeling cold for the first time. You leave the prep area and step toward the cooking line, where steam rises from stainless steel kettles, warm air rolls across the floor, and the smell of food becomes stronger than the smell of plastic trays and frozen storage. This is where the meal begins to feel real. Not finished, not packaged, not ready for a freezer shelf, but real enough that you can imagine someone eating it after a long day. Your job is to assist the cooking line. Sauce bases are moved into large heated tanks. Vegetables are added in measured batches. Protein portions are staged beside industrial cookers. Rice, pasta, noodles, dumplings, or other meal components move through heating, steaming, mixing, or partial cooking depending on the product. Every station has timing. Every batch has a target. Every temperature matters. A senior cook line operator shows you one sauce tank through a small inspection window. The sauce turns slowly inside, thick and glossy, while the mixer arm folds it again and again. It looks simple, but he does not treat it simply. He watches the color, the flow, the steam, the way it coats the metal surface, the way it moves when the heat changes. Too thin, and it may become watery after reheating. Too thick, and it may not spread correctly in the tray. Too little heat, and the food safety target may not be met. Too much heat, and the flavor can flatten before the meal even reaches a customer. Then one batch of vegetables comes out softer than expected. Not ruined. Not obviously wrong. But the senior operator stops the sample tray and presses a piece gently with a gloved finger. It gives way too easily. If this moves forward, it may look acceptable now, but after freezing, shipping, and reheating, it could turn mushy in the customer's bowl. The batch is marked for review. You feel the tension immediately. The prep team is still sending ingredients. The portioning line is waiting. The freezer schedule is planned around timing. But the cooking line cannot pretend texture does not matter. At level 2, you learn that preparation protects the meal before it exists. At level 3, you learn that cooking creates the version of the meal the customer will judge later. Because frozen food is not cooked once. It is cooked here, frozen later, then brought back to life in someone else's kitchen. If the factory gets this moment wrong, the customer will taste that mistake days, weeks, or months later. And the next level will take the cooked food into trays, where every portion must look fair, full, and ready to become dinner. Level 4, the portioning and tray filling worker. At level 4, the food begins to look like the picture on the box. Not perfectly. Not beautifully. Not yet. But the separate parts finally come together in one tray. You step into the portioning and tray filling area, where the pace feels faster than the cooking line. Empty plastic trays move forward in neat rows. Cooked rice, pasta, vegetables, protein, sauce, and side components wait in stainless containers beside filling machines and workers with scoops, tools, and watchful eyes. The room is still cold enough to remind you this is frozen food, but warm traces from the cooking line follow the product in. Your job is to help make every tray feel fair. That word sounds simple until you stand beside the conveyor. One tray receives rice. Another receives vegetables. Another receives sauce. A portion of protein is placed into position. The product is not only being weighed. It is being arranged. If the sauce lands in the wrong corner, the tray looks messy. If the vegetables cover the protein, the meal looks cheaper. If the portion looks too small, even a technically correct weight can feel disappointing. A senior worker shows you 2 trays. The first one looks balanced, food spread cleanly, colors visible, sauce contained, protein easy to see. The second one has almost the same weight, but the sauce has run across the tray and the vegetables are piled unevenly. To the scale, the difference may be small. To the customer, the difference feels like quality. You begin checking trays as they pass. Too much sauce on one side. A piece of vegetable outside its section. A protein portion sitting crooked. Rice pressed too flat. A tray edge with a smear that could affect sealing later. Every correction is small, but the conveyor does not slow for your comfort. Then one filling nozzle begins dropping sauce slightly off-center. At first, it is barely noticeable. Then several trays pass with the same problem. The senior worker signals for adjustment. The line slows. The affected trays are pulled aside. You help move them into review, feeling the pressure from behind as more trays keep coming. At level 3, you learn that cooking creates the version of the meal the customer will judge later. At level 4, you learn that portioning creates trust before the first bite. Because frozen food is judged twice, once by the picture on the box, and once by what the customer sees when the film peels back. If the tray looks careless, the whole factory feels careless, even if every machine before it did the job correctly. And the next level will send these filled trays into the coldest part of the factory, where the meal must be locked in place before time and temperature can damage it. Level 5, the blast freezer operator. At level 5, the meal enters the part of the factory that decides whether it can truly become frozen food. The trays arrive from portioning in steady rows, still carrying the shape of a fresh meal, sauce in one section, vegetables in another, protein placed where the customer expects to see it, rice or pasta sitting under a thin layer of warmth from the previous line. But warmth is now the enemy. You step into the blast freezer area wearing a thicker protective jacket, and the cold feels different from the warehouse. The warehouse was cold storage. This is controlled force. White vapor spills from the freezer tunnel every time a door opens. Metal rails shine with frost. The floor feels harder under your boots. The air bites the skin around your eyes, and every breath feels sharper than the last. Your job is to help monitor the blast freezing process. Trays move into the freezer tunnel on a conveyor, disappearing into a cloud of cold air powerful enough to lock the meal into its final structure. Temperature, airflow, spacing, line speed, tray position, everything matters. If the trays move too slowly, the schedule backs up. If they move too quickly, the center may not freeze properly. If airflow is uneven, one side of the tray can freeze differently from the other. A senior operator shows you a sample tray coming out of the tunnel. The surface looks firm. The sauce is no longer glossy. The vegetables are locked in place. The meal that was soft and vulnerable minutes ago now looks stable enough to travel. Then a temperature alert appears on the control screen. No alarm screaming. No dramatic failure. Just a small warning from one freezer zone. The senior operator does not ignore it. A few trays from that section are pulled aside. You help move them to the check station while cold vapor rolls around your legs. One tray looks normal, but the operator checks the center temperature and frowns. It is close, but not enough. Close does not pass here. At level 4, you learn that portioning creates trust before the first bite. At level 5, you learn that freezing protects that trust. Because frozen food is not simply food placed in the cold. It is food forced through a narrow window of time and temperature, where the factory must stop change before change ruins the meal. And once the tray leaves this tunnel, the next level will wrap it, seal it, box it, and prepare it for a world where the cold chain must continue long after the factory door closes. Level 6, the packaging line worker. At level 6, the frozen meal gets its armor. The food has already been prepared, cooked, portioned, and locked by the blast freezer, but it is still vulnerable. A frozen tray without proper packaging is not ready for the world. It can dry out, absorb odor, lose quality, get damaged, or lose the trust of the customer before anyone even opens it. You step into the packaging area, where the air is cold but the pace feels faster. Trays slide forward on conveyors, firm and frosted, moving toward sealing machines, film rollers, carton feeders, checkweighers, and boxing stations. The room is full of controlled motion, plastic film unrolling, trays aligning, boxes opening, belts turning, cartons stacking. Your job is to help monitor the packaging line. The tray must sit correctly before the film comes down. The seal must be complete. The box must match the product. The package must not crush the tray. The carton must close cleanly. A weak seal here is not cosmetic. It can become freezer burn, contamination risk, return product, customer complaint, or a meal that looks ruined before it is ever heated. A senior worker hands you a sealed tray and tells you to look closely at the edge. At first, it looks fine. The film is tight. The tray is closed. The meal is protected. Then he tilts it under the light. One corner has a slight wrinkle where the film did not sit flat. It is small, but small is enough. That tray is pulled from the line. You begin checking more carefully. Film tension. Tray alignment. Frost near the rim. Box condition. Carton flap position. You notice how many things can go wrong after the food itself is already correct. Then one lane begins feeding boxes slightly out of sync. A tray enters, the carton closes, but the alignment is not perfect. Not destroyed. Not dramatic. But enough that several boxes may need review. The line slows. Workers pull affected packages aside while the cartons behind them continue arriving. At level 5, you learn that freezing protects the meal. At level 6, you learn that packaging protects the promise. Because the customer does not see the blast freezer, the cooking line, or the temperature logs. They see the box. They trust the seal. They believe the food inside survived the journey. And the next level will decide whether that trust is actually earned before the product moves into storage. Level 7, the Food Safety Quality Inspector. At level 7, the frozen meal is almost ready to disappear into the supply chain. It has survived the warehouse, prep line, cooking line, tray filling, blast freezer, and packaging machines. It looks complete now. It looks like something that can sit in a supermarket freezer, wait inside someone's apartment, and become dinner after a few minutes of heat. But here, in the quality control room, looking complete means nothing until the product proves it. You step into a cold, clean inspection area where finished packages are pulled from the line and opened under white light. There are scales, thermometers, seal testers, sample trays, reheating stations, data screens with no readable text, and stainless tables where ordinary frozen meals are treated like evidence. Your job is to help inspect safety and consistency. You check package seals. You weigh trays. You inspect frost patterns. You measure product temperature. You look for signs that a tray warmed too much, froze unevenly, or sat too long between stages. A senior QC inspector places one finished meal in front of you. From the outside, it looks fine. The box is clean. The tray is sealed. The meal is frozen solid. Nothing about it seems suspicious. Then she cuts the film open and checks the food inside. One corner shows heavier ice buildup than expected. Not a disaster. Not proof of failure by itself. But a sign worth investigating. Maybe the package had a weak seal. Maybe the tray had extra surface moisture. Maybe the freezing process was uneven. Maybe it is only one unit. QC does not guess. More samples from the same time window are pulled. You help open them, weigh them, test them, and place them into separate trays. Some pass. A few raise questions. The batch is held while the pattern is reviewed. You feel the invisible pressure immediately. Production wants flow. Packaging wants space. The warehouse wants product. Trucks want schedules. But the QC room answers to something bigger than speed. It answers to the person who will open this meal at home and assume the factory protected them from everything they could not see. At level 6, you learn that packaging protects the promise. At level 7, you learn that food safety defends that promise. Because frozen food is not safe simply because it is cold. It is safe because every temperature, seal, surface, weight, and time window has been checked before the meal is allowed to leave. And once you understand how much power sits inside one whole decision, the next level asks whether you can manage an entire production system where heat, cold, people, machines, and deadlines all push against each other. Level 8, the Frozen Production Manager. At Level 8, you stop inspecting one meal and become responsible for the system that creates thousands of them. You stand in a glass-walled office above the frozen production floor, tablet in one hand, radio clipped near your collar, watching the entire process move below you like a machine made of smaller machines. Ingredients come out of cold storage. Prep teams cut, separate, and stage components. Cooking lines turn frozen parts into meal bases. Portioning teams fill trays. Blast freezers lock everything in place. Packaging wraps, seals, boxes, and sends products toward QC. From above, it looks organized. From inside your headset, it sounds like pressure. Prep reports one ingredient is clumping again. Cooking says a sauce batch is thickening faster than expected. Portioning says one filler nozzle is drifting off-center. Blast freezing reports a small temperature warning in one zone. Packaging has a short stop because of film wrinkles. QC is holding a batch for ice buildup review. No single issue sounds catastrophic, but together they begin to form a shape you know too well. The line is still moving, but the risk is spreading. Your job is not to panic. Your job is to decide where to slow down before the system forces you to stop. A supervisor asks whether the held batch can move into the warehouse while QC finishes the pattern review. The warehouse is tight. Trucks are scheduled. Retailers expect product. A delay here does not stay here. It travels into delivery windows, freezer space, store shelves, and sales forecasts. But you remember Level 7. A frozen meal is not protected by appearance. It is protected by proof. You say no. The held batch stays held. You redirect technicians to the freezer zone. You tell packaging to isolate the affected time window. You ask cooking to adjust the sauce timing before the next batch enters portioning. You slow one tray line so product does not wait too long before freezing. You update the schedule with numbers nobody wants to see. This is the strange reality of management in a frozen food factory. You are not only managing people or machines. You are managing temperature, time, texture, safety, and trust all at once. At Level 7, you learn that food safety defends the promise. At Level 8, you learn that production management is the art of stopping small risks before they become invisible failures. Because in frozen food, the most dangerous mistake is not always the one that shuts the line down. Sometimes it is the one that keeps moving quietly toward a customer's freezer. And beyond your factory floor, the next level will show you how every frozen box must survive trucks, warehouses, containers, store freezers, and a cold chain that cannot afford to break. Level 9, the Cold Chain Distribution Director. At Level 9, the frozen food factory no longer ends at the loading dock. It stretches into warehouses, trucks, containers, supermarket freezers, apartment kitchens, and every cold space between them. You leave the production floor and step into a cold chain operations room, where the pressure is quieter but wider. On the screens are warehouse temperatures, truck routes, container schedules, freezer capacity, delivery windows, inventory levels, and regional demand. Below the office window, workers move finished cartons into a frozen warehouse where the air is so cold that every open door breathes white vapor into the room. Your job is to protect the cold chain after the factory has done its work. That sounds simple until you understand what the product is asking from the world. It cannot sit too long in the wrong zone. It cannot wait on a warm dock. It cannot be loaded into a truck that has not reached the correct temperature. It cannot survive a careless transfer just because the box still looks clean. A frozen meal carries an invisible condition: it must stay frozen. A logistics manager points to one route on the screen. One refrigerated truck is delayed. Another warehouse is close to freezer capacity. One retailer wants an early delivery. A regional distribution center reports that a freezer door stayed open longer than expected during a busy unloading window. None of these issues looks dramatic by itself. But you know how frozen systems fail. Not usually in one cinematic disaster. They fail in minutes. In waiting time. In warm air slipping into a loading bay. In a truck that leaves late. In a pallet placed in the wrong lane. You approve a change. Reroute one shipment to a warehouse with more cold storage. Delay a lower priority delivery to protect a higher risk product. Tell the loading team to hold cartons until the truck temperature is confirmed. Warn the retailer that a window may shift. The plan on the screen adjusts cleanly, but in the real world, it becomes forklifts, thick jackets, night shift drivers, freezer doors, fuel costs, and workers moving quickly because cold does not negotiate. At level 8, you learn that production management is the art of stopping small risks before they become invisible failures. At level 9, you learn that cold chain distribution is responsibility across distance. Because a frozen meal is not finished when it leaves the factory. It is only finished when it reaches the customer still protected by the same cold promise that began in the ingredient warehouse. And above this network, there is one final level, where someone decides what kind of frozen meal millions of people will trust after a long day. Level 10, the global frozen food brand decision maker. At level 10, the frozen meal is no longer only a product in a factory. It is a decision about time, money, convenience, taste, trust, and what people will eat when they are too tired to cook. You sit inside a bright global food brand meeting room, far away from the freezer doors, blast tunnels, cold warehouses, and loading docks. On the table are sample trays, packaging mock-ups, reheated meals, ingredient cost reports, regional taste notes, and market maps with no readable text. Some products are budget meals. Some are family-sized trays. Some are breakfast bowls, pasta dishes, dumplings, pizza slices, rice meals, vegetable sides, and healthy options designed for shoppers who want convenience without feeling careless. Around the table are people from R&D, marketing, food safety, finance, supply chain, packaging, and regional sales. Each person sees the meal differently. R&D sees flavor and texture after reheating. Marketing sees the picture on the box. Finance sees margin. Food safety sees risk. Supply chain sees frozen storage, transport, and temperature control. Regional sales sees what families, students, workers, and busy parents might actually buy. Your job is to decide which frozen meal becomes real. One proposal looks strong. A comforting pasta meal with rich sauce, bright vegetables, and packaging that promises a warm dinner in minutes. The test photos look good. The cost is manageable. Marketing likes the emotional angle, a long day, an easy meal, a full plate without cooking from scratch. But then food safety raises a concern about reheating consistency. Supply chain warns that one ingredient may not stay stable across long frozen storage. Production says the sauce thickness may slow portioning if the formula is too heavy. Finance wants the price lower. Marketing wants the box to look more generous. And you remember every level below you. You remember cold pallets in the ingredient warehouse. Frost clumps on vegetables. Sauce thickening on the cooking line. Portion trays that looked unfair even when the weight was close. Blast freezer warnings. Film wrinkles. QC holds. Truck delays. Open freezer doors. A frozen meal is easy only for the customer. For everyone else, it is a chain of risks disguised as convenience. You do not approve the fastest launch plan. You approve a controlled rollout. More reheating tests. More freezer stability checks. More realistic packaging photos. More supply chain review. More time for the factory to prove that the meal can survive the journey from ingredient warehouse to home freezer without betraying the promise on the box. Some people at the table want speed. You choose trust. At level 9, you learn that cold chain distribution is responsibility across distance. At level 10, you learn that brand power is responsibility across someone's dinner. Because frozen food is not only sold to people who want convenience. It is sold to parents after work, students with no time, night shift workers, people living alone, families stretching a budget, and anyone opening a freezer hoping one box can become enough. You started with cold pallets and strict temperature checks. Now you decide what millions of people may heat up after a long day. And that is the final truth of this factory: a frozen meal is never just frozen food. It is time saved, effort reduced, trust packaged, and a cold chain hidden inside a box small enough to carry home.